The hotel ballroom erupted in applause for Sarah. She beamed, clutching her award. Then, Wayne Jensen stepped from the shadows, placed a hand on her waist, and kissed her, a long, possessive kiss. My heart seized. My boss, Frank, clapped harder. Wayne looked right at me, a flicker of triumph in his eyes. For 11 years, my marriage to Sarah had been the steady hum beneath everything else in my life. It was a structure I believed inviolable, built piece by piece with shared jokes, quiet mornings, and a mutual understanding that rarely needed words. Lately, though, a subtle distance had crept in. It was nothing dramatic, just a shift in focus, a slight widening of the gap between our individual orbits. Sarah had been driven, more so than usual, consumed by her work. Her new challenge, as she framed it, was to outperform a new colleague in her department, a man named Wayne Jensen. She spoke of him often, mostly in terms of professional rivalry, a benchmark to exceed. I thought a surprise anniversary trip would bridge that distance. My boss, Frank, had given me the idea, noting my preoccupation with work and suggesting a reset for Sarah and me. Brenda, my secretary, a woman who prided herself on efficiency, handled the logistics. She found 2 rooms in separate hotels in downtown Chicago, a detail she attributed to a last-minute rush and limited availability. Sarah was at the grander, more established hotel for her conference. My room, a more modest arrangement, was 2 blocks away. The flight was uneventful, a blur of ordinary sky and quiet contemplation. I landed, took a taxi, and settled into the routine of checking in. The air in Chicago was crisp, carrying the distant rumble of the city. As my taxi pulled away from my hotel, the driver, a man with tired eyes and a thick accent, motioned to a place down the street. "Good food there," he said, nodding towards a dimly lit, unassuming restaurant, tucked between 2 larger buildings. "Quiet, too. Good for a late bite." I thanked him, not giving it much thought. After dropping my bag, I walked the 2 blocks to Sarah's hotel. The plan was to appear in the lobby, a grand, marble-floored space, and watch her reaction. I called her room from the house phone. No answer. I tried her cell. Straight to voicemail. A mild disappointment, but not unexpected. Conferences often ran late. I decided to check the public areas. My approach was methodical. First, the main bar, then the smaller, less formal cafe, then the various meeting rooms visible from the hallway. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just a glimpse of her, a way to make the surprise work. As I passed a bustling restaurant within the hotel, separated from the main lobby by a wall of frosted glass, I heard it, a faint, familiar laugh. It was Sarah's, unmistakable, a bright, clear sound that always found its way to me. I moved closer, subtly. The restaurant was crowded, alive with the murmur of conversations and the clinking of glasses. Through an opening in the glass partition, I spotted her in a corner booth. She was leaning forward, her posture relaxed, her gaze locked on the man opposite her. He wasn't a client I recognized. Their interaction was easy, intimate, far beyond the professional rapport she'd described with her colleagues. Her hand rested on the table, and his occasionally brushed it, not quite touching, but close enough to imply an unspoken connection. The way she smiled, a softer, less guarded smile than the one she often showed me, was a quiet punch to the gut. This was not a business dinner. Then, he leaned in, his words a low murmur against the restaurant's din. Sarah laughed again, a little breathlessly this time. He moved his hand from the table, cupped her cheek, and then, slowly, gently, he kissed her. It was a tender, undeniable kiss. Not a hurried peck, but a soft, prolonged press of lips. His eyes were open, and I saw them clearly. It was Wayne Jensen. The man she was outperforming. The man who was her professional rival. I pulled back from the opening in the glass. My movements quiet, almost automatic. I found an empty armchair in the lobby, slightly out of the main thoroughfare, and sat down. The marble floor felt cold beneath my feet. My mind, usually quick to organize and analyze, now worked with a chilling clarity. The image replayed, frame by frame. Sarah. Wayne. The kiss. Each detail was catalogued, stored. There was no surge of anger, no immediate flood of emotion, just a stark, undeniable fact. After what felt like a long time, they emerged from the restaurant, stepping into the lobby's bright lights. They were holding hands, his thumb gently tracing the back of her knuckles. She leaned into him as they walked, her head resting briefly on his shoulder. They moved towards the main exit, their steps synchronized. As they reached the revolving doors, she looked up at him, a wide open smile on her face. He returned it, then pulled her closer. They exited the hotel, still clinging affectionately. I rose from the armchair. My legs moved without conscious command. I followed them, maintaining a discreet distance. They turned right, walking side by side, their silhouettes clear against the city lights. They didn't go far. They stopped at the entrance of a building between the two hotels, its sign barely visible in the dim light. It was the unassuming restaurant the taxi driver had recommended. The restaurant, the Copper Kettle, was exactly as the taxi driver described, unassuming. With a low ceiling and a warm, aged wood interior. A hostess, a young woman with a tired smile, led me to a small, isolated table near the back, ostensibly for privacy. It offered a clear line of sight to the booth where Sarah and Wayne Jensen sat, tucked away in a corner near a large window. I accepted the table, settling in with a practiced ease. My focus narrowed. Sarah's face, usually composed, was animated. Her eyes, which often held a certain reserved quality with me, were bright and open as she looked at Wayne. There was a lightness to her posture, a relaxed curve of her shoulders that I hadn't seen in months, maybe even a year. Her gaze, when it met Wayne's, was attentive, almost lingering. It was the kind of look that implies a shared secret, a mutual understanding that bypassed the need for extensive conversation. Every detail registered. The time, a little past 9 o'clock. Their table, a worn leather booth. The drinks, 2 glasses of what looked like amber liquid, likely bourbon or an old-fashioned. Their body language was easy, comfortable. His arm was draped casually over the back of the booth, occasionally brushing her hair. Her hand rested on the table, often near his, sometimes turning her glass absent-mindedly. A waiter approached. I ordered a neat bourbon, a simple request that wouldn't require further interaction and allowed me to remain unnoticed, just another patron winding down the evening. The drink arrived quickly, dark amber in a heavy glass. I took a slow sip, the burn mild, and watched. The restaurant's ambient noise, a low hum of conversations and cutlery, occasionally thinned enough for snippets of their dialogue to reach me. They spoke in hushed tones, but certain words, inflections, carried. "Future plans?" Wayne said, his voice a low rumble, accompanied by a soft chuckle from Sarah. Then, a few minutes later, Sarah, her voice a little higher pitched with excitement. "Getting away." The fragments were like scattered pieces of a puzzle, each one slotting into a larger, increasingly clear image. They weren't talking about a new project at work. They weren't discussing conference logistics. The tone, the intimacy, the words themselves, they pointed to something deliberate, something shared and hidden. My phone was in my pocket. I reached for it, keeping it low, pretending to check a message. With a careful angle and a quick tap, I took a few photos. They were blurry, shot from a distance, but clear enough. The faces were distinct. Wayne Jensen. Sarah. No doubt about it. I repeated the action twice more, each time a soft click muffled by the restaurant noise. The flash was off. I noted the restaurant's name, the Copper Kettle, and its address on the wall near the entrance, mentally mapping its position relative to Sarah's hotel and my own. 2 blocks from her, 4 from mine. directly between us, a convenient halfway point. The thought was colder than the bourbon in my glass. Their conversation, the looks, the physical intimacy, culminating in the phrases future plans and getting away. It was not a misunderstanding. It was a conscious, deliberate act, a betrayal, articulated in hushed tones and tender gestures. I finished my drink slowly, calculating. It was important not to be seen by them, not yet. I waited for a lull in their conversation, a moment when they were both looking away, before signaling the waiter. I paid the bill, left a reasonable tip, and exited the restaurant, stepping back into the cool Chicago night. My pace was even, unhurried. As I walked the 4 blocks back to my hotel, once in my room, the quiet was absolute. I pulled out my phone. The images were as I expected. Grainy, slightly out of focus, but undeniably, Sarah and Wayne, leaning close, eyes locked. The confirmation was stark, unyielding. There was no room for doubt now. My initial plan of a surprise anniversary reunion had unraveled. Confrontation, at this stage, would be purely emotional, a reaction, not a strategy. I needed more data. I needed to understand the scope, the timeline, the depth. I decided on a methodical approach. Before setting my phone down, I checked the call log. Not a single incoming call, not a text message, from Sarah since I'd left home that morning. It was another data point, another confirmation of where her focus truly lay. Returning home, I settled into a rhythm of manufactured normalcy. The Chicago trip, I told Sarah, had been cut short due to an unexpected scheduling conflict on my end. She nodded, understanding, or so it seemed. The anniversary trip was postponed, not canceled, I assured her. My performance of an unburdened husband was convincing, even to myself at times, but beneath the surface, a new directive guided my actions: observe. The changes were subtle at first, then more pronounced. Her phone became an extension of her hand, often held low, screen angled away. Conversations, once open and uninhibited, were now often hushed, her voice dropping as I entered a room. If I asked who she was speaking to, the answer was always just a work call or Brenda about a client file. The explanations were delivered with a casual air, almost too casual. I began to review our joint bank statements. It was a regular task, but now I approached it with a sharpened focus. I found a series of unusual expenditures. A hotel booking for a weekend in a town an hour outside the city, a place neither of us had discussed visiting. Then there were luxury items, a specific brand of high-end perfume, a designer scarf items I hadn't seen her wear, and certainly hadn't bought for her. Each transaction was a quiet data point, cataloged in my mind. How are things going with that new project, the one with Jensen? I asked one evening, during dinner, keeping my tone light. Oh, it's fine, she said, picking at her salad. Demanding, though. Lots of late nights. Wayne's good. Efficient. We're making progress. Her eyes, however, seemed to dart away, avoiding my gaze for a fraction of a second too long. I asked about specific meetings, about deadlines, trying to catch her in a factual discrepancy. Her replies were consistent but vague, often circling back to the idea of intense focus and team effort. A week later, while helping her tidy up after a particularly busy morning, I found it. A crumpled receipt in the bottom of her purse, tucked beneath a forgotten lipstick and a loose penny. It was from the Copper Kettle. The date was precisely the night I had seen them in Chicago. The items listed were 2 bourbons and a shared appetizer. My hand tightened around the paper for a moment before I smoothed it out and placed it back exactly where I found it. The physical proof solidified the raw data into something tangible. Her work briefcase, once left casually by the front door, was now often taken directly to her car. If she arrived home late, she'd carry it inside and place it in the spare bedroom, an unusual place for her work items. It was a small shift, but it suggested a desire for privacy, for something to be kept out of my casual purview. I knew Sarah's work login, It was stored in our shared password manager, a relic from a time when we had no secrets. One evening, after she'd gone to bed, I accessed her work calendar. It was a grid of appointments, meetings, and deadlines. I scrolled back through the past few months. There it was, clear and unambiguous. An increasing number of off-site meetings with Wayne Jensen. Some were marked simply WJ Project, others WJ Conf. There were more of these than with any other colleague, and they often coincided with her supposed late nights or weekend work. I remembered earlier conversations, weeks before Chicago, when I had casually asked about Wayne Jensen. "Just a colleague, Art," she'd said. Her voice even. Very professional. "Just trying to outdo him, you know how I am." She had reassured me then, dismissing any notion of anything beyond work. The memory of those reassurances now felt like a deliberate construction, a preemptive measure. I started a private notebook. A small, leather-bound volume I kept locked in my desk drawer. Each inconsistency, each new piece of information, was recorded. Dates, times, observations, expenditures, calendar entries. The act of writing it down removed it from the realm of suspicion and placed it into the category of evidence. The emotional distance between us, which I had first perceived as a slow drift, was now a concrete barrier. It was not just between us, but within her. A part of her was walled off, inaccessible to me. One Saturday morning, as we drank coffee, I tried to bridge it. "Sarah," I started. "We haven't talked much about our future lately. The house? Maybe expanding our family?" I watched her carefully, noting the subtle tightening around her eyes. She stirred her coffee, her gaze distant. "Art, I'm just so focused on work right now. This promotion. It's everything. It's too much to think about anything else." "Really?" Her responses were vague. Polite, but firm. She steered the conversation back to her career ambition, a shield against any discussion of intimacy or shared plans. The wall remained. The quiet compilation of data in my notebook, while informative, lacked the irrefutable weight I knew I would eventually need. My observations were subjective, the blurry photos were circumstantial. For true proof, the kind that could stand unchallenged, professional help was necessary. I researched private investigators in the area, looking for someone discreet, efficient, and, most importantly, someone who understood the pragmatic approach required for such sensitive matters. I found Miller. He was a man in his late 50s, with a neatly trimmed gray beard and eyes that held a steady, assessing gaze. His office was sparse, functional, located in a quiet building downtown. I laid out the facts, starting with Wayne Jensen's name, Sarah's work details, and the Chicago incident. I spoke in a calm, factual tone, presenting the information as a case study, devoid of overt emotion. Miller listened, occasionally interjecting with a precise question. "So, the initial contact was a kiss, in public, followed by them going to a restaurant together?" He confirmed, making a note. "And you have reason to believe this has been ongoing, prior to that event?" "Yes," I replied. Based on her work schedule, her demeanor, and financial discrepancies, Miller outlined his plan. Surveillance, starting with Sarah's workday and extending into evenings and weekends. He mentioned phone record analysis, which would require legal means, and credit card checks, which he could pursue with the right authorizations. "We'll build a timeline," he said, "confirm patterns, and gather visual evidence. My job is to give you facts, Mr. Hayes. Just the facts." His Midwestern pragmatism was reassuring. His first report arrived via encrypted email a week later. It was concise, professional. Miller had monitored Sarah's movements for 3 consecutive days. The report confirmed frequent contact with Wayne Jensen outside of work hours. They met for coffee before work twice. He often saw her to her car after work, lingering for longer than a professional farewell. Attached were photographs, not blurry, distant shots like mine, but clear, sharp images. Sarah and Wayne Jensen, seated at an outdoor cafe during a weekday lunch, laughing. Her hand was resting on his arm in one photo, a gesture of casual intimacy. His head was tilted towards hers, a shared secret in their expressions. The professional investigator's eye caught details I had missed, subtle cues that spoke volumes. The report also detailed their travel. Miller had cross-referenced public records and professional databases. A pattern emerged. Business trips for Sarah often coincided with Wayne Jensen's travel schedule. They stayed in the same hotels in different cities: Minneapolis, Detroit, Indianapolis. I reviewed my own financial records again, overlaying them with Miller's findings. Parallel charges appeared: hotel stays, restaurant bills, often at establishments known for their private dining. The financial proof was accumulating. Miller also tracked Wayne Jensen's home address and car registration. Single guy, he reported in a follow-up call. Lives alone in a decent place in the suburbs. No other cars registered to the address. No indications of a live-in partner. It confirmed my suspicion. Wayne Jensen was unattached, making him readily available for the role he was clearly playing. Continue, I instructed Miller. I need something definitive. Concrete proof of a physical relationship. Undeniable. My voice was flat, my request devoid of the emotional weight it might have carried weeks ago. Miller understood. A few days later, he provided me with a small, innocuous-looking burner phone. Leave this somewhere, she'll find it, he advised. Make it seem like a coincidence, a forgotten spare. It has tracking software, and it'll clone texts and calls. I placed the phone on the kitchen counter, half hidden beneath a stack of mail. Sarah found it the next morning. Oh, a new phone? Whose is this? She asked, picking it up. Must be that old one I was looking for, I said, shrugging. Forgot I even had it. You can use it if you want, for work calls or something. My company gives them out as spares. She accepted it, seemingly without suspicion, adding it to her purse. My days began to feel like a slow-motion film, each movement precise, mechanical. The initial shock had receded, replaced by a chilling detachment. Emotions were secondary, replaced by the relentless pursuit of information. I was moving through my life with a singular purpose, an investigator in my own unraveling marriage. Miller's final report arrived in a heavy, sealed envelope. Delivered by courier. It was comprehensive, a meticulous compilation of data, observations, and evidence. I opened it with a detached precision, my hands steady. The package contained printouts, digital files on a secure USB drive, and a summary narrative. The first set of photographs depicted Sarah and Wayne Jensen. They were entering a suburban apartment building late at night. A week after the burner phone had been found, Sarah carried a small overnight bag. Another set of photos showed them leaving the same building the following morning, coffee cups in hand. Their postures relaxed. Almost domestic. Miller's report confirmed the address belonged to Wayne Jensen. The visual evidence was irrefutable. Next were the call logs from the burner phone. They detailed hundreds of calls and text messages. The sheer volume was staggering. The texts, cloned onto the USB drive, revealed a hidden language of affection, pet names, inside jokes, detailed discussions about their days, plans for their next meetings. There were explicit plans for future encounters, carefully coded but unmistakable, arranging late work sessions that would end in Wayne's apartment or a discreet hotel. Can't wait until Friday, one text from Sarah read. Miss your touch already, Wayne Jensen replied. Counting the minutes. Save some of that magic for me. Nah. The email exchanges, recovered from Sarah's work account through a subpoena Miller had quietly obtained, outlined their shared desire for secrecy. They discussed strategies for evading suspicion, for maintaining their respective facades. "We have to be careful," Wayne had written. Art almost caught us in Chicago. It was a cold, hard confirmation of the event I had witnessed. I then returned to Sarah's work laptop, the one she so carefully guarded. I remembered her often working late on it, even at home. I navigated through her files, using a recovery program Miller had provided, and found a hidden, encrypted folder. The password was Wayne's birthday. Inside were dozens of photos. Sarah and Wayne Jensen, smiling, arm in arm, on a beach somewhere warm. Clearly a weekend getaway. They were undeniably intimate, their bodies pressed close, their expressions unguarded. The dates on the photos matched some of the unusual weekend expenditures I had noted in the bank statements. Miller's report also highlighted a significant, undeclared gift from Wayne Jensen to Sarah. A receipt, painstakingly acquired from a high-end jewelry store downtown, showed a purchase for a diamond pendant, a piece valued at several $1,000s. The receipt was dated 3 months prior. I remembered Sarah's casual mention, a few weeks later, of treating herself to a new necklace, a quiet lie that now screamed its true nature. I laid out the entire timeline. Sarah's increased focus on work, her late nights, the initial casual mentions of Wayne Jensen, his promotion to her direct supervisor, the first off-site meetings, the weekend trips, the private phone calls, the secret apartment visits. It all coalesced into a clear, devastating narrative. The affair had not been a sudden, impulsive act, but a slow, calculated progression. It had begun around the time Wayne Jensen took over as her new boss, blossoming under the guise of professional collaboration. A profound sense of emptiness settled over me. The investigation was complete. All the data had been collected, analyzed, and confirmed. The logical conclusion had been reached. The betrayal was not just an act, it was a carefully constructed deception, woven into the fabric of our shared life. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had married, had systematically dismantled our life together, piece by careful piece. My heart felt like a hollowed-out space, echoing with the cold, hard facts. Life, I'd learned, had a way of presenting choices. Some were made in the heat of the moment. Others were slow, deliberate turns down a road you knew would lead somewhere costly. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. The day after reviewing Miller's final report, I methodically prepared for the confrontation. I gathered the evidence, a neatly arranged stack of photographs, the printouts of the text message exchanges, the detailed PI reports, the bank statements highlighting the unusual expenditures, and the receipt for the diamond pendant. Each document was placed into a clear plastic sleeve, ordered chronologically, ready for presentation. My aim was not an emotional outburst, but a factual accounting, a dispassionate presentation of undeniable truths. I chose the living room, a space we rarely used for heavy conversations, preferring the kitchen. It was neutral, quiet, and offered no immediate escape. Sarah arrived home from work as usual. I asked her to sit down, explaining that we needed to discuss something important. She looked at me, a flicker of apprehension in her eyes, but complied. "I need you to look at these," I said, my voice even, as I placed the first plastic sleeve, containing the Chicago restaurant receipt and my own blurry photos, on the coffee table between us. I offered no commentary, no accusation, just the facts. Her eyes widened as she recognized the receipt, then narrowed at the images. "What is this, Art?" she asked, her voice a little too sharp. "What are you doing?" I slid the next sleeve forward. Miller's clear photographs of her and Wayne Jensen at lunch, laughing intimately. "This is a record of your activities, Sarah." "This is ridiculous," she scoffed, pushing the photos back slightly. "It's work. Wayne and I have lunch sometimes. Everyone does." Her denial was immediate, a reflex. I then presented the photos of her and Wayne entering and leaving his suburban apartment. Her face drained of color. "This is photoshopped," she whispered, her voice barely audible. You can't believe this. It's not, I replied. Miller confirmed the address. He also confirmed your overnight stays. I moved on, presenting the call logs from the burner phone. Then the text message printouts. Her eyes scanned the affectionate language, the explicit plans. She picked up a sheet, reading a message, her lips moving silently. She recognized her own words. These are private, she said, her voice trembling now, a desperate edge to it. How did you get these? That's not relevant to the content, I stated, unflinching. The content is what matters, the truth. I then placed the email exchanges on the table, outlining their desire to keep the affair secret. She closed her eyes, then opened them, tears beginning to form. It was just a mistake, Art. A stupid mistake. It didn't mean anything. She tried to minimize, to reduce the complexity of months of deception to a moment of weakness. I pointed to the stack of evidence. A mistake, Sarah? This is not a mistake. This is a pattern. From Chicago to the business trips, the stolen weekends, the secret phone, his apartment, the coordinated lies, the careful planning to keep it hidden. This isn't a single error in judgment. This is a deliberate, extensive deception. This is a choice. She finally broke down, tears streaming down her face, her shoulders shaking. I'm so sorry, Art. I don't know what happened. I just got caught up in it. She admitted to the affair, but the mitigation, the attempt to portray herself as a victim of circumstance, was still there. The diamond pendant, I interjected, my voice cutting through her sobs. The one Wayne bought you. The one you said you treated yourself to. Where is it? Her head snapped up, a fresh wave of shock washing over her face. She had not expected me to know about that. It's in my jewelry box, she stammered. Art, please. We can fix this. We have history. 11 years. Think about what we built. She reached across the table, trying to take my hand, to appeal to the emotional core she believed still existed. I pulled my hand back. The contact felt alien. The history you refer to was built on trust and shared truth, I stated. You systematically dismantled that. You chose to build a separate life, a hidden life, with someone else. This is not something that can be fixed, Sarah. The foundation is gone. I looked at her, my gaze steady, unwavering. The marriage is over. This is the logical consequence of your actions. The day after the confrontation, I contacted a divorce attorney recommended by a trusted colleague. Her office was modern, efficient, much like Miller's. I brought with me a meticulously organized binder containing all the evidence. Photographs, texts, emails, financial statements, and Miller's comprehensive report. I laid it all out on her desk, speaking in the same calm, factual tone I had adopted throughout this process. She reviewed each piece, nodding occasionally, making notes. This is a very strong case, Mr. Hayes, she stated, her voice professional and assured. The documentation of the infidelity is irrefutable. This will certainly factor into asset division, should it become contested. I articulated my desired outcome. A clean break. No lingering drama. No protracted battles. Equitable division of assets. As fair as the law allowed. My goal was resolution, not retribution. I want to move forward, I told her, with as little unnecessary conflict as possible. She then discussed the legal implications for Sarah. Given the nature of the affair, she explained, if this became public, especially within her professional sphere, there could be significant repercussions. Her company has clear ethics policies and a relationship with a direct supervisor, particularly one that started while he was her supervisor. Could be grounds for disciplinary action, up to and including termination. She looked at me, gauging my reaction. I showed none. The fact was simply another data point, another consequence. Beyond the legalities, I found myself pondering the moral consequences for Sarah. Not just the loss of our shared life, but the erosion of her reputation, the inevitable reevaluation of her self-perception. When faced with the full truth of her actions, that, I understood, was a reckoning she would have to face alone. My own emotional state was a landscape of quiet resolve. The profound sense of betrayal remained, a deep ache in a place where trust once resided, but it was now overlaid with a practical determination. The shock had long passed, replaced by a clear-sighted view of what needed to be done. I drafted a brief, dispassionate note to Sarah, outlining the basic terms I would be proposing for the divorce, instructing her to contact her own legal counsel. There would be no more emotional appeals, no more attempts at reconciliation. The decision had been made, the path charted. I began to systematically review my personal finances, separating accounts, adjusting budgets, planning for the practicalities of life. As a single man, it was a tedious process, but necessary, each step a further detachment from the illusion of our shared future. I informed my boss, Frank, of the impending divorce. "Sarah and I are separating," I said during a quick conversation in his office. "It's amicable, but it will require some personal time over the next few weeks." I offered no details, and Frank, a man of discreet understanding, asked none. "Whatever you need, Art," he said. "Take it." The thought of revenge, of actively seeking to inflict pain, held no appeal. The consequences of Sarah's actions, both legal and moral, would unfold naturally. Her choices had set in motion a chain of events, and those events would play out without my active intervention. My role as an investigator was complete. Now, I was merely an observer of the inevitable. I looked around the house, the familiar objects, the shared spaces. For 11 years, I had believed this was the foundation of my life, the bedrock of my happiness. But in the stark light of the evidence, I recognized the chilling truth. The happiest years of my life had been built entirely on an illusion, a carefully constructed facade that had finally, irrevocably, crumbled. The envelope, hand-delivered by a process server, was the final, concrete action. Sarah received the divorce papers in the quiet of our home, a space that was now quickly becoming hers alone. Her initial reaction was a mixture of anger and disbelief, quickly followed by a stark realization of the legal machinery now in motion. The detailed filing, supported by the extensive evidence I had provided to my attorney, painted an undeniable picture. There was no room for negotiation on the facts, only on the practicalities of dissolution. The terms were clear: equitable division of assets, as defined by law and bolstered by the documented infidelity. Our shared home, bank accounts, investments, all were laid bare for legal apportionment. Sarah, who had previously dismissed my warnings as mere threats, was now faced with the cold, hard reality of losing half of everything we had built. The leverage provided by the evidence made my attorney's position unassailable. There were no emotional arguments that could counter the facts. As the divorce proceedings slowly progressed through the local courts, the news began to filter out. Friends, initially hesitant, eventually understood. Colleagues, noticing Sarah's strained demeanor and sudden professional shifts, started to connect the dots. The isolation she experienced was palpable. Dinner invitations dwindled. Casual workplace conversations became stilted. Her choices had created a vacuum around her, a consequence she had not anticipated in her carefully constructed world of secrecy. Wayne Jensen's role in the affair, particularly his position as Sarah's supervisor, also surfaced within their company. Discretionary inquiries were made, internal policies reviewed. The ethical implications of a relationship between a superior and subordinate were clear, even without explicit details of the affair being publicized. An uncomfortable professional environment developed around him. His career, once on a clear upward trajectory, now faced a distinct, unspoken ceiling. His transfer to a regional office, weeks later, was presented as a strategic relocation, but the underlying reason was transparent to those who knew. I processed the finality with a quiet sense of closure. It wasn't happiness, not in the traditional sense, but a deep, settled calm. The truth, once a jagged shard, was now a smooth, understood stone in my hand. The cost of my logical investigation had been profound. I had lost the life I had meticulously built, the partner I believed I knew, the future I had envisioned. But in exchange, I had gained an unvarnished truth, a clear vision unburdened by illusion. That, I understood, was a valuable, albeit painful, acquisition. I began the slow, methodical process of rebuilding my life. I found a new apartment, smaller, simpler, but entirely my own. I started new routines, explored new interests. There was a quiet strength in beginning again, in the clarity that came from standing on solid, if freshly laid, ground. I had no desire for vengeance, no lingering bitterness. The consequences, both legal and moral, were unfolding as they inevitably would. As the days turned into weeks, then months, I found myself watching the quiet Midwestern sunsets more often. The sky would bleed from orange to purple, then fade into the deep, unyielding blue of night. Each day ended, giving way to the next, much like the patterns of human choice and consequence. The logic of it all was cold, unyielding, and entirely real.